because far from smashing the gangs, so far this year, 29,000, to be precise, 29,003 illegal immigrants have crossed the English Channel. That is the worst year in history, and it is up by 38% compared to last year. That is
right then, let's set the scene. What you're about to witness is nothing short of a political circus, the kind that would make even the most seasoned Westminster observer wince. Picture this: Prime Minister's questions, where logic routinely steps out for a smoke break, and the shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, seems to have misplaced her grip on political reality. It's the kind of spectacle that defines modern British politics. Noisy, chaotic, and at times deeply revealing. Because behind every exchange of words lies the struggle for power, perception, and survival. Before we roll the footage, a quick note. If you value sharp political analysis, the kind that cuts through the noise, do take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Over 98% of viewers don't, and yet it costs nothing while helping us bring you more of the truth, unfiltered. Did you hit subscribe? Excellent. Let's get into it.
Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Home Secretary for advance sight of her statement. The government has now been in office for well over a year. And I think, listen, and I think it's fair to say not even their kindest friends would say they think it has gone very well. But listening to her statement, it sounds like she thinks everything is fine, and if there are any problems, it's all somehow somebody else's fault. Is she living in a parallel universe? After over a year in office, she must now take responsibility for what is happening under this government. Now, it's very interesting during her statement, Mr. Speaker, to notice she did not mention her favourite phrase from a year or so ago, that she was going to smash the gangs. I wonder why she was so silent on her previously favourite catchphrase. Well, the answer is it's not going very well. Now, she mentions National Crime Agency disruptions. Let me gently point out that 84% of those National Crime Agency disruptions that she cited a few minutes ago are classified as not being high impact. And if we look at National Crime Agency arrests for organised immigration crime, they actually went down by 16% in the last financial year, hardly smashing the gangs. And in fact, the NCA's arrests for organised immigration crime in that financial year were only 26, a drop in the ocean compared to the tens of thousands crossing the Channel. Now, Mr. Speaker, it was also rather conspicuous that the Home Secretary did not mention at all, not even a word, about the numbers illegally crossing the English Channel. Now, I wonder why that was. I wonder why she forgot to say a single word about that. Well, the reason, I'm afraid, is pretty clear. Because far from smashing the gangs, so far this year, 29,000, to be precise, 29,003 illegal immigrants have crossed the English Channel. That is the worst year in history, and it is up by 38% compared to last year. That is not success, it is failure. Things are not getting any better, they are getting worse. This government is failing, and everyone can see it. That is why there are protests up and down the country, and where those protests are peaceful, I support them. That is why, this is a shocking figure, 75%, let this sink in, 75% of the public think the government is handling immigration and asylum badly. 75%. Now, let me turn to hotels. Now, in the 9 months before the last general election, 200 hotels were closed down, including the Bell Hotel in Epping. But since 200 hotels closed down, but since the election, the numbers in asylum hotels have actually gone up by 8%. Now, had that previous trend of closures continued, today there would be no asylum hotels open at all. But I asked the Home Secretary to confirm this. Will she confirm that she will not reduce hotel usage simply by shunting asylum seekers from hotels and into flats and HMOs, which are desperately needed by young people? Will she give the House that categoric assurance? Now, Mr. Speaker, last week, the Home Secretary's lawyers said that the rights of illegal immigrants are more important than the rights of local people in places like Epping. And when this was expressly put in those terms to the Education Secretary yesterday on the Trevor Phillips programme, in those words, she shamefully agreed. Those statements are a disgrace. Does the Home Secretary realise how angry that makes people feel? It speaks of a government not on the side of the people in this country. It means the government appears to care more about the rights of illegal immigrants than our own citizens. So will she apologise for what her lawyers and the Education Secretary said? And will she undertake that ministers and their lawyers will never say that again?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I do worry about the Shadow Home Secretary's amnesia and the 14 years that his party was in government, in which they never managed to do any of the fantasy things that he claims. So coming back to the reality rather than the fantasy rhetoric that he said.
Now picture the scene. The chamber is full, the tension palpable. Members of Parliament sit in apparent concentration, nodding along while discreetly glancing at their phones beneath the benches. Then rising with quiet confidence, Chris Philp takes the floor. Immaculately dressed, composed and unmistakably prepared, he looks every bit the man who's discovered a live microphone and intends to use it with devastating precision. He begins not with theatrics, but with controlled force. His opening line is measured, but it lands hard. The government's performance over the past year has been so underwhelming, even its most loyal supporters can no longer deny it. The words hang in the air. A murmur ripples through the chamber, but the real moment arrives when Philp turns his attention to Yvette. Cooper, seated with the look of someone realizing, too late, that the ground has shifted beneath them. Let's not forget, Cooper once boldly declared she would smash the gangs. It was her go-to slogan, repeated with enthusiasm, as though it were party policy carved in stone. But on this day, Philp notes with clinical accuracy, she doesn't utter the phrase once, not even in passing. A noticeable omission, and one that doesn't go unchallenged. Why the silence? He asks pointedly. The question less inquiry, more indictment. He then delivers the data. According to official figures, 84% of the so-called disruptions by the National Crime Agency, the very metric Cooper was once proud to cite, were considered low impact. In other words, politically convenient, operationally negligible. And then the number that causes the real stir. Just 26 arrests last year for organized immigration crime. 26. A figure that exposes the vast chasm between rhetoric and reality. Philp pushes forward. 29,333 people have illegally crossed the English Channel this year alone. A record, the worst on file. A collapse in control. Not a stumble, but a systemic failure. This isn't smashing the gangs, he says. It's enabling them, offering tea and handing over the Wi-Fi password. Cooper's response? Silence. A few hurried notes, the kind of visible discomfort only facts can provoke. She fails to mention the crossings altogether, an omission as glaring as it is damaging. It's like turning up to a budget debate and forgetting to mention the economy. And for those wondering whether the public even cares, Philp is ready with the answer. 75%, 3 in 4 voters, believe the government's immigration and asylum policy is failing. That isn't discontent. It's a public reckoning. And how do Labour MPs react to all of this? They laugh. Yes, laugh, as Philp presents the data. Chuckles echo from the benches like it's pantomime season in Westminster. But laughter doesn't dismiss evidence. It exposes vulnerability. Because when you're confronted with statistics this damning, the optics of amusement do nothing but undermine your credibility. Philp, to his credit, remains composed. His delivery is sharp, his facts precise. With deliberate reference, he recalls Cooper's apparent amnesia regarding her party's 14 years in government, years in which little of what is now demanded was achieved. The message is clear. Labour's slogans have short lifespans, and even shorter memories. As Philp concludes, the room is left in silence. A few awkward coughs, some downcast glances. And yes, one or two quiet nods from the backbenches. Because the truth, when laid out this clearly, is hard to dismiss. So what's the takeaway? That slogans don't build policy? That silence in the face of statistics is its own kind of answer. And when Chris Philp arrives with a spreadsheet in one hand and a challenge in the other, the wise response is to listen, not to laugh. This wasn't just a debate. It was an exposure of spin, of political theater, of hollow promises dressed up as strategy. Another day in the Commons. Another mask removed, and the slow, unmistakable sound of accountability knocking on the door. Stay tuned.